I never thought I would share this with anyone outside of my immediate circle, but sometimes life presents you with an experience that needs to be spoken out loud. Have you ever had that feeling? When something weighs so heavy on your chest that holding it in is like drowning. On the day of my daughter Rebecca's wedding, I met him for the first time. Jason, my future son-in-law. Such a charming young man with attentive eyes and a disarming smile. You know the type, don't you? The ones who make you feel like the only person in the room when they talk to you. I remember saying to my husband Frank that evening, "That boy is going to be good for our Rebecca." Frank only nodded, distracted by the open bar. At the time, I didn't yet know how wrong I was about both men in that conversation. Do you ever look back on moments like that and wish you could have warned your young man? Of course I have. It started innocently enough. Jason stopped by our house when Rebecca was busy at work, just checking on you guys. He'd say. Such a caring gesture from his son-in-law, or so it seemed to me. Frank was away on business trips a lot, and I appreciated his company. Jason would help with little things around the house. Fixing a leaky faucet, trimming the hedges. Frank always seemed too busy to handle the task. I was 62 at the time and felt invisible most days. When you reach that age, gentlemen, the world starts to look past you. Has that ever happened to you before? That strange feeling of becoming transparent? But Jason helped me feel visible again. He praised my cooking, asked about my garden, listened to my stories with genuine interest, or what I took to be genuine interest. One afternoon he came in with a bottle of wine. "Rebecca's working late again," he explained. "Thought you might like some company." We sat on the porch swing and watched the sunset color the sky in shades of orange and pink. The conversation flowed easily, aided by the wine. He put his hand on mine when I told him I felt lonely because Frank was gone so often. "You deserve better than that," he whispered. Have you ever craved attention so much that you ignored the alarm bells in your head? Have you ever wanted so badly to believe someone cared about you that you ignored the obvious red flags? The touches became more frequent. A hand on my shoulder that lingered too long. A hug that was too close. Then came the text messages. Innocent at first, then increasingly intrusive. I told myself I was imagining things. It was my daughter's husband, for heaven's sake. I was old enough to be his mother. But on a rainy Tuesday in April, when Rebecca was at a conference in Chicago and Frank was supposedly in Denver for work, Jason showed up unannounced at my door. His look that day was very different. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, stepping closer. "There's something between us. You feel it too, don't you?" I wish I could say I'd immediately shoved him out the door. I wish I could say I was strong enough to cut off his advances without hesitation. But the truth is, I hesitated. For one shameful moment, I thought about it. After years of feeling invisible, someone needed me. Not a mother, not a wife, not a grandmother. Me. That moment of weakness haunts me to this day. Have you ever stood at a moral crossroads and felt yourself wavering? What kept you from the edge? Rebecca's face flashed through my mind. My beautiful daughter who trusted both of us. I stepped back and told Jason to leave. The look on his face changed from desire to something darker, perhaps danger or wounded pride. "Frank doesn't care," he said coldly. "He's been sleeping with his assistant for years." Those words hit me like a fist to the stomach. I brushed them off as a cruel lie born of denial. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it quickly sprouted in the soil of our 38-year marriage. I began to notice different things. Frank's late-night calls to the other room. Business trips that seemed to multiply. The smell of unfamiliar perfume that sometimes clung to his shirts. Receipts for gifts I never received. Have you ever had your world come crashing down, not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of small discoveries, each one undermining the foundation until only broken pieces remain? I hired a private investigator, something I never imagined in my 60s. The evidence came in a manila envelope 2 weeks later. Photographs of Frank and a woman half my age entering a hotel room. Text messages that left no doubt. Credit card statements that showed dinners and jewelry purchases on days he supposedly stayed late at work. 38 years of marriage, 2 children, 4 grandchildren. All of this was built on a foundation that had been crumbling for years without my knowledge. That night, I ran into Frank. He didn't even have the decency to deny it. "You were so aloof," he said, as if that justified everything. "We haven't been close in years." "And whose fault is that?" I demanded, remembering all the times I'd reached out to him but been rebuffed, excused by fatigue or stress. And the worst part? When I told Rebecca about Jason's behavior, wanting to warn her, and maybe admit my own weakness, she hadn't believed me. "Mom, you're just projecting Dad's cheating onto you," she said. "Jason would never do that." The isolation was complete then. My husband betrayed me. My son-in-law tried to seduce me. My daughter thought I was either lying or delusional. I've never felt so alone. I wonder if you were ever disbelieved when you told the painful truth. How did you deal with that particular heartache? The next day I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. In my 62 years, I was starting over. The divorce proceedings were ugly, as they often are. Frank tried to hide assets. I fought for what was rightfully mine after nearly 4 decades of supporting his career, raising our children, and keeping house. 6 months later, Rebecca called me in tears. She had discovered messages in Jason's phone, not to me, but to 3 other women. One of them had been her best friend since college. Apparently, these affairs had been going on for years. She apologized for not believing me. I hugged her as she cried. This child of mine who had experienced the same betrayal I had, only much earlier in my marriage. "How did you survive it, Mommy?" she asked between sobs. I wish I knew the simple answer. I wish I could tell you all that there is an easy way through such betrayal. But the truth is that you are going through it, gasping for breath, day after day. You learn to trust yourself again before you can even think about trusting others. It's been 2 years now. I am 64 years old, living alone, but not lonely. I've reconnected with old friends, made new ones at my water aerobics class and book club. I've traveled to places Frank always thought were uninteresting. I discovered parts of myself that had been submerged during the marriage, a love of abstract painting, a talent for gardening, an enjoyment of jazz music. Rebecca divorced Jason. She, too, is healing in her own way. Frank married his assistant 6 months after our divorce was finalized. I hear they're already having problems. No surprise there. As for Jason, he still tries to contact me sometimes. I've blocked his number, his email, his social media accounts. Some boundaries are impossible to cross. I tell this story not for sympathy, but because I know there are others who have experienced similar betrayal. At our age, starting over seems impossible. The prospect of being alone seems frightening. But I want to tell you that there is life after betrayal. There is a power within you that you don't even know exists until you have to find it. Have you faced betrayal in your life? How have you recovered from it? Have you discovered, as I have, that there are unexpected gifts hidden in pain? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And let me ask you this. If you could go back and give advice to your younger self about relationships and trust, what would you say? What wisdom did you gain that could help others who are just starting out on their journey? Remember, gentlemen, It's never too late to demand honesty in a relationship. It's never too late to stand up for your worth. And it's certainly never too late to start over. That's the hardest lesson I've learned. Sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the deepest betrayals. We are capable of surviving them and even thriving in their aftermath. How about you? What has been the hardest and most important lesson you've learned?